Oh, it's all very quiet. Good afternoon, everybody. Very glad you could come and join us. And there's a lot of sessions on, so delighted you can come and listen and hear a bit more about Northern Ireland. I have a question for you to start with. Are you all enjoying the hospitality of Northern Ireland? Yes, I can see some people doing this and some people going, yes. That's what it's all about. It's interesting, I was talking to Dr. Paul Bate, the CEO of the UK Space Agency last night, and he said the buzz is amazing around the conference, the ICC, and he actually likened it not to a space conference, but a space celebration. And that's what this is, it's a space celebration, and we're delighted to be hosting it here in Northern Ireland. I have my colleagues here from Invest Northern Ireland and ADS, and we're going to give a wee bit of a showcase of what we do, and of course we will all be around at the end of this if anybody wants to have a chat. As has been with the rest of the conference, there is Slido. Now, we only have 45 minutes and there's a lot to get through, so if anybody does have any questions, please use Slido. It'll be moderated on the front. However, I have a feeling we're going to be getting kicked out straight on because there's another one at 10 to. So, I mean, for those that are new to Northern Ireland, we are a very innovative bunch of individuals. We're a region of entrepreneurs. People probably don't realise from beyond here, the modern tractor was invented by Harry Ferguson, the portable defibrillator, the ejector seat, and the first, I didn't know this, the first electric tramway in the 1800s was actually at the Giant's Causeway. So we're used to doing things slightly differently and thinking forward and thinking ahead. Innovation is very much in our DNA. Lillian Bland, for example, was the first lady to build and fly her own aeroplane. Ernest Walton, of course, splitting the album. Professor Dame Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who I think is actually here today, discovered a new type of star, the pulsar, and got the Nobel Prize, of course, for that. The pneumatic tire that all our cars and vehicles are on, and the Kelvin scale, absolute zero. The absolute temperature scale was invented here in Northern Ireland. And for those that don't know the region, you remember that Spirit Aerosystems here, that was the Short brothers. The very first ever commercial contract by the Wright brothers is actually here in the SAFE in Northern Ireland. So we're not the largest aerospace region in the world, but we're certainly the oldest. And think about that, over 100 years building a supply chain around that and all of the capabilities. So what we're doing now is we're looking at the capabilities that we've built from the shipbuilding, from that aerospace, and more recently now in our digital security and digital data analytics capabilities, and applying that to the space sector. So for us, it's a natural evolution of what we're doing. And you hear a lot in every sector about skills and STEM and education and enforcing that next workforce that comes through. But we've been doing this from the 1960s in space. The Armagh Planetarium, the observatory is well known, an old observatory, but the planetarium in the 1960s was the first ever planetarium where you could actually have video on a dome. Terence Murdoch invented that. And if you go to any planetarium anywhere in the world, that technology was invented here at Armagh in Northern Ireland. And if any of you watch things like Who Wants to Be the Millionaire, and they ask the audience and everyone presses a button on the seats, the first place in the world that had that was at Armagh. It was the first place where you could actually, the audience could choose the direction of the show. If you wanted to go extragalactic or go to the solar system, you could do that. So very innovative in the way that we think about STEM, our skills, and we're very joined up. These figures are courtesy of our colleagues, recent figures from ADS. But $1 billion added value to the economy in aerospace and defence, about 9,000 employees, and apprenticeships are very, very important. And as you've heard probably throughout this conference, it's not just about our research skills, it's about building that apprenticeship into the space sector. We can all be part of the space sector, and I think that's the really important message we're trying to get across as we go forward in the next few years. Give you an idea of the size of Northern Ireland if you don't know. I was trying to think, where could I compare it to? City of Glasgow. The population of Northern Ireland is not far off the size of the city of Glasgow. So we really do punch above our weight. There's only about 1.8 million people here. About 1.9 billion annual turnover in the aerospace and defence sectors. When you think of the size of the region, that's pretty impressive compared to the rest of the UK. And the output per worker, about £100,000. The added value we put in per person is at 54%, higher value than what we do in the rest of the UK. So a very strong workforce. But of course, to undermine and underpin that workforce, you need that strong skills and research base. And people probably don't realise that 1 in 3 aircraft seats in the world are actually done here in Northern Ireland. These figures on the side by the MOD was actually more of a criticism in that we need to do better here. You've probably heard recently, great opportunities for us here, in the shipbuilding, building the next fleet for the Navy, over £1 billion investment into Northern Ireland, which is fantastic. But per person here in Northern Ireland, there's still a lot to do compared to the rest of the UK. So we're working very closely with our colleagues at MOD and with ADS to grow the sector, to see what we can do to make sure we're leveling up. We don't expect to level up just because we're here. We're leveling up because we're a centre of excellence, and what we do here is should be noticed and recognised by the rest of the world. We have 2 world-class universities. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly, but both are doing lots of work within aerospace and space. It's Ulster University. You can see the facts here on the screen. The big point here is the 1.3 billion of city and growth deals. If you go into the centre of Belfast, you've walked around, you can see the Ulster University, the size and scale of what is happening here in Northern Ireland. They've got the 3 campuses across Derry, Londonderry, Coleraine and Belfast. So a lot of young talent coming through here. What we're trying to do is to create an ecosystem that actually supports that. And we don't have the brain drain. People can stay here, work here and live here. Because I'm sure you've seen, if you've been here over the last couple of days, it's a great place to be. It's great crack. And we're very warm, friendly people. The food's very good too. Weather, you're very lucky, but it's actually always like this. Don't believe the weather forecasts. Queen's, CSIT and ESIT, so the Centre for Electronics and Cybersecurity. I mean, we are looking to the future of what does space actually mean. And when you think about what do you need for space, and I know I'm speaking to the converted, but what do you need? You need to design, you need to build and manufacture whatever asset you're going to put in space on the ground segment. You then need to test it. You need to get it launched, so you need some sort of launch platform. You need to get it into space. You then need to deploy it some way. And then, of course, once it's deployed, you have to be able to read, ingest, and communicate the data that's coming from those assets, from those satellites around the planet. And as in the next few years, back to the moon again, you're going to see that with the Lunar Gateway. And of course, on to Mars and Jupiter. You'll probably see in the next 30 years, human beings living on the planet Mars. I think it's a really exciting time. However, I would have to say, I wouldn't particularly want to go up with Elon Musk after the weekend. We might give it a few years before I hitch a ride on that spacecraft. So we have that research capability and we have the industrial capability. And these are the sort of areas that we're well known for. And it is every part, apart from the launch, we can't launch from here because of the way the Northern Ireland is positioned. But it is about collaboration, working with our colleagues in Scotland and the new spaceports. And I'm sure you heard the recent announcement with Skyrora and Spirit Aerosystems here in Belfast. So we are very, very collaborative. Yeah, you're aware that there's clusters right across all of the UK now, funded by the UK Space Agency. And more that trust is growing. So yes, we've got all the capabilities. We want to do it here in Northern Ireland, but it's about collaboration right across all of the UK. And in the last year, really starting to see those collaborations, and I'll explain some of them as we go along. And we're absolutely honoured and delighted that we have a prime here, Thales Alenia Space. So the Propulsion Competence Centre is here in Belfast. Now, this is relatively new. I know Leslie and probably Jeremy, you'll remember this. We actually started this journey with an American company, Aerojet Rocketdyne. And unfortunately, I got NILPOD. It got so far, we set up European Space Propulsion, but unfortunately, it doesn't go too far. But that made the rest of the Thales family and the Thales Alenia Space family sit up and listen to what is going on over in Belfast. And they look at the capabilities and the competencies that they had, and they said, that's the place for us. They have the skills base. They have the heritage people coming through. They have the research centres of excellence. Let's set up here. And now we have the different systems going through. And it's not just the propulsion systems. The actual platforms are being designed here now in Northern Ireland. And I think it's incredible to think, from Northern Ireland 10 years ago, I would never have thought we would have had sub-assemblies. We had propulsion systems being integrated onto the satellites, tested, and then going away to be launched. We actually have these satellites now in orbit around our planet that have left Belfast, go to the launch platforms, and off they go. So it's absolutely fantastic, and that is ramping up, and we're delighted to see that in Northern Ireland. And if there's anybody from Thales Alenia Space, you're very welcome here. It's really great. But of course, we're building the supply chain around that, and that's really the next stage of growth. I think we'll be working with InvestNI and ADS to grow that ecosystem. and that family. And we do have some really great companies. If you come over to the Northern Ireland stand, so in Hall 2, stand J7, you'll see the supply chain companies. I mean, I always love using this one, Springco. So this is a small SME company that actually have their springs on Mars. And I think that's incredible. You know, you think of the quality they have to have, the competition they would have had, the competence, and the stuff is actually now on Mars. And they're not just on Mars, they're on the object closest to the sun, the solar orbiter. Their springs are on their way right now to the icy moons of Jupiter, on the JUICE mission, on the Gaia mission. It's fantastic that a small company to do it. And there is the point I like to make out to our companies here in Northern Ireland. It's not about the massive big missions. Of course, you can be part of them. You can work with the primes. But as an SME, you can work in space. You can create, you can diversify what you're doing. With data, you can either create an entirely new service or just augment a product and service that you already have. And that's really very exciting for our upstream and downstream and research communities. Another two examples, and I see Tom Allen. If anybody was at Tom's dinner, well done last night, Tom. It's probably why we've all got very sore heads, but thank you very much for coming along. As I mentioned, if anything that's going to go through the atmosphere in space, of course, it's going to go through a whole profile of vibrations and shocks as it goes up. And that's exactly what Tom's doing. He's creating that vibration, shock, thermal testing for the satellites. And I think, Tom, we're delighted to see that it really is starting to get traction. And it's very important. I'm very aware we have the Harwell Space Campus, and we do have the National Testing Facility. But for the smaller companies, the SMEs that want to get something tested, they want to do it quickly, they want to be agile, they're not one of the primes, it's really important to have those facilities where they can engage not just with the facility, but those that can facilitate. So, and I'm sure Tom would say the same thing, it's not just being a testing facility, it's a friendly face, it's competence and it's excellence, where if you're going to go through this testing, you have engineers on a one-to-one basis working with you, not just to facilitate what they're doing, but actually help you try to understand what testing you can do and maybe even change your profiles for testing. So those are the sort of companies that are important to us, that helping that SME supply chain. And there's something completely different. FD Technologies, KX. KX is a software-based company. It's a fintech company, for those who don't know it. It's a home-based PLC with about 3,000 employees and over 17 offices around the world. Their technology underpins the stock markets. Wall Street would literally crash. It's mission critical if that technology wasn't there. And you probably wonder, well, why is a fintech company that's doing very well in fintech being interested in space and defense? But look at the parallels. I mean, in fintech, what are you doing? You're collecting billions of rows of information. You're trying to analyze that, fuse it, ingest it. You're trying to analyze it in microseconds to look for anomalies and fraud detection. You have to have an evidence trail. It has to be secure. I was talking to Gary Connolly at KX. Over $1 trillion goes through their system every single day. That has to be robust. It has to be secure. It has to have great heritage in the sector. Well, hang on. What do you need in the space sector? Well, it has to be robust. It has to be secure. As the space sector grows, the data volumes are getting exponential. If we look at astronomy, for example, the radio array, the Atacama radio array, when it is turned on in the next couple of years, it will generate more data than the entire global internet traffic in a year every single day. And you're looking for you're trying to detect very small anomalies and changes. It's the same with the space sector. As we put up satellites, there's over 3,000 active satellites in orbit right now. We're not going to talk about the debris and everything else, but over 3,000 satellites. How many satellites do you think conservatively will be in the skies in about 10 years? What do you think? Shout out. If it's about 3,500 active satellites now, 10 years, what do you think? The latest conservatives are about 100 to 150,000, possibly up to 250,000. So not only is it getting very busy up there, but those satellites are becoming more capable. They're getting smaller and smaller, small sats down to CubeSats. Now, I know that's a bit of contention. Do we stay with CubeSats or do you think we're going to get slightly bigger? So I think small sats is probably the way we're going to go. But the capabilities on board those satellites, the technologies, the payloads are getting more and more advanced. The actual cameras, the systems, they're all there. And not only are they working on their own, they're becoming constellations, and the likes of Starlink are mega constellations. And you have to bring all of that information back down to the ground, and you have to have B2B communications to keep the constellation in orbit. And where's all that data going? And how do you ingest it? Do you ingest the data once it lands on the ground and then do something with it? Or do you do something funky with the data and analytics on board the satellite, on the edge itself, and then only transmit what we need? There's been a few sessions about that already. Where do we go? And I see a lot of people going, well, we don't need it right now, but 10, 20 years time, the capabilities on board those satellites, we can't even think about what they're going to be capable of, and we need to be ready now. So it's companies like that that are doing great jobs. And an example of how quickly they did this over 5 years is that they actually worked with NASA Frontier Development Laboratory and with the European Space Agency. And two programs I'll just highlight very quickly because I'm aware of time is exoplanet discovery. So why would you put fintech technology to look at planets going around other stars to locate them? Well, what happens is your space asset, your telescope, only looks at a certain part, a very small part of the sky, for a very small amount of time, and you're looking for variations in what's called the light curve. So if a star is big and bright, and a planet is very small and dull by comparison, but when that goes in front of the host star, the light changes because you get a shadow, so you can measure that. But there's a lot of things that can cause those light curves. So by being able to classify what is a candidate and what is probably just something else, an artifact, is really, really important, because once that telescope moves away, it doesn't come back. And you need to catch that while the telescope's looking at that part of the sky so that you can turn all the ground-based telescopes towards it, or you miss it, and that's it. So this was, believe it or not, this was at NASA a manual operation, paying these guys and girls who are incredibly bright, basically look and go, has that changed? What's happening? You know, it's a terrible waste of resource and time. When we created the program that NASA uses to actually do exoplanet discovery using fintech technology in Northern Ireland. I think it's fantastic. And another one we worked on was around solar flares, coronal mass ejections. Now, I'm sure some of us know what they are. They can become a real problem for our infrastructure, our electronic infrastructure on the planet. If you get what's called a Carrington type event or coronal mass ejection, which releases a lot of energy from the sun, once it reaches our magnetosphere and reaches the atmosphere, it charges that up. That can actually overpower the power grids. It's certainly not good for your satellites. The last time this happened in Canada, it took down the power lines and took out the power. Now, think of today, we all use mobile phones, we all use electronic, we have autonomous vehicles coming very soon. We certainly don't want the power turning off when we're doing that. So being able to predict those anomalies and then being able to do something about it is really, really important. It's called $1 trillion storm. One of these things that they reckon conservative could cost about $1 trillion to the economy. In fact, so important now that the UK government is seeing this as a priority, you know, because it could be a serious catastrophe for our way of living on the planet. So we worked with this to try and understand, can we predict when you're going to have these storms? And the KX guys came up with a really good idea of using the telescopes. So before it was line of sight, we now have telescopes here around the sun on both sides. So we can now detect when something's going to happen before it comes into line of sight, and if that's going to be a potential hazard for us. That's very important as we think about deep space exploration, going to the moon and going to Mars. When you're on your way there, you know, you need to be able to protect the crew and your assets because you don't have the atmosphere, you certainly don't have the Van Allen belt to protect you as you go out that far. So it's really, really important. So these are underpinning, and even the way those storms can affect the propagation of a signal through the atmosphere is really important, because that could then wipe out your GPS, your comms. You think every morning and every night you wake up and go to bed, you're always using space. You pick up the mobile phone, probably when you're watching TV, if you're using GPS, if you're looking at the weather and Earth observation, we all use space. It's just becoming intrinsic to our way of life. And it's really, really important we protect that. So really, really amazing that we're doing this stuff out of Northern Ireland. And, you know, it's our innovation, it's in our DNA to solve these sort of problems. And we're delighted to be working with the global community in the UK. And of course, we don't work alone. As I said, we have the space clusters around the UK. We are aligned, so ADS, Invest and I think Leslie's in the audience. Leslie, you're there. I think we're coming to the end of the joint report after the decade of a Partnering for Growth, which was the first time space was actually in a white paper in Northern Ireland for aerospace, defence, security and space. And we see that growth happening here in Northern Ireland. So as I said, this conference for me is almost a culmination of the Partnering for Growth strategy. It's what do we do next after the conference. That's really important. And that's the conversations we want to be having with you as we go forward. I'll give you an idea. We are as joined up as we can be here in Northern Ireland. As I say, we're about the size of Glasgow, so we have to be. And we have the NI Space, which is the cluster now, which is funded by the UK Space Agency, Invest and of course the ADS, which is helping us with all of that MOD and the strategic decisions we're making. We have a Northern Ireland Space Leadership Council, which is set up, which is really giving us the strategic voice of what direction do we want to take, what are the next big steps, what skills do we need, what are the requirements coming forward. And we have the ADS Northern Ireland Space Special Interest Group, which is NISIG, and that's very much about what contracts are out there. So once a quarter, we will bring the primes or the tier ones, and Leslie always makes sure somebody in the room that has influence, and he's absolutely right, because that's what our companies want. They want the contracts. They want to know what's happening. So we have the strategic vision, we have the companies, and we have the interest group, which really helps open the doors for our companies to the rest of the UK and to the world. So it is starting to grow. It's still very young in Northern Ireland, but then if you look at the space industry, it's also very young, and it's growing exponentially. And we have things like the innovation deal, 1.3 billion city and growth deal here in Northern Ireland. We're developing the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Centre here. There are opportunities to put space into the infrastructure now, not just in our strategies, but in how we do our manufacturing, how we design. Will 3D printing and additive manufacturing become something of the future? Of course, we've got companies like LPE, laser prototypes. And you think about what I said earlier, you have to test everything in a testing facility. Well, if you've got 1,000 parts that go into a propulsion system, you have to test 1,000 parts. If you can 3D print just one piece, you're testing one piece, already you can start to see the saving human resource and where we're going with it. And one of the things I would say also is Northern Ireland is an excellent place to pilot activities. We are small, we're joined up, everybody knows everybody, so we can really make things happen. And the UK Space Agency has recognised this in recent interventions. So last year, Northern Ireland received the most regional funding of any region. Now, we put good bids in and we won them fair and squarely, but we got there. And the two that we're very proud of is with ADS, and the UK Space Agency is running the STEP programme. So if any of you are familiar with aerospace, you'll be aware of the National Aerospace Technology Exploitation Programme, NATEP. We are running STEP, which is the Space Technology Exploitation Programme. And basically what we did is we looked at how it's administered through ADS in aerospace, and we took aero off and we kept space. And that's what we're doing, because it's a tried and tested methodology, and it's something we've been working towards for many years. And we're delighted the UK Space Agency has given us the funding to trial this. We've actually got 3 companies going through it at the minute. Why is this so important? The relationships with the primes and the tier ones and heritage. Many of you who are in space engineering know you almost have to be in space before somebody will give you a contract to be in space. It's a bit of a catch-22. So what we're doing is we're helping our companies raise the technology readiness level so that they can compete. But more importantly, it's that relationship with the prime and the tier one. Gives them confidence, they have the heritage, and they can move forward. And I know several of the primes are actually looking at what we're doing here in Northern Ireland as a model of engagement. This is a pilot, and we're hoping this pilot will be rolled out nationally. We've did it before with defence. We'll do it again with space. It shows this is how we catalyse the programmes. We're very proud of them. And in the downstream, we're working with the public sector. The public sector can be the biggest users and developers of space technology to provide more effective public governance and services. Many of you will probably recognise what we're looking at here, the Copernicus image of harmful algal blooms. A lot of the things you can't do from the ground for space, climate change variables, a lot of those variables, you can really only do it if you have that holistic view from above the planet. And we've created in Northern Ireland, a public sector. It's the Earth Observation Portal. I see Evelyn Lyons sitting. Hello, Evelyn. Sitting in the back. It's being forwarded by the Ordnance Survey of Northern Ireland, where all the government departments are coming together to say, how can we use space? It's actually as much a promotion programme as actually trying to work out the case studies. Because I was sitting with somebody very recently in a workshop who came in and goes, why are we going to use satellites? It's always cloudy. You can't see anything in Northern Ireland. Not realising the new capabilities with synthetic aperture radar. I mean, you can see day and night. It's pervasive. It goes through clouds. It goes through rain. It's always on. And it went from that workshop going, I don't think I'll ever use satellites, to going, I think I will always use satellites. It completely changed the way we're doing it. I think my colleague Susan is in the audience. I think we've now got 29 use cases that have come out of the workshops. Those 29 use cases, we're going to try and bring a few of them to fruition by March 25, again, funded by the UK Space Agency. Why is that important? Because instead of setting human resource out to do the urban planning or mapping or looking at different variables, maybe you can do it by satellites. It's a saving on the public purse. That is so important for the space community. Just turn around with confidence to the public sector, to people and say, don't keep doing it the way you've been doing it. Here's a new way of doing it, and it's cheaper. So that's really, really important for us to prove that. It's being piloted in Northern Ireland. The agency and ourselves and the public sector are very excited about this. And we're delighted to have the Ordnance Survey of Northern Ireland take the lead in this. It's a cross-government departmental programme, and I think it's going to have great success over the next coming years. Now, I'm delighted, because I don't know much about this at all, I'm delighted that our colleague, Frankie Devlin from KPMG, who's I've been told is the guru when it comes to the Windsor Agreement. For those in the audience that aren't aware, there is a special agreement in place, a trade agreement specifically for Northern Ireland. So I'm going to call upon Frankie Devlin for a few minutes to tell us a little bit about the Windsor Agreement. Frankie, please stay stand. Give him a round of applause, please.
Frankie.